I was dull and slow-witted since childhood, while my elder sister possessed extraordinary talent. At the Marquis Mansion's poetry gathering, fearing I would embarrass myself, she secretly composed a poem for me, but quite unexpectedly, the gathering's true purpose was to select a wife for the second young master. The poem she wrote for me caught his eye. Later, I married into the Marquis Mansion. After the wedding, my dullness was soon noticed by Pei You. Only then did he realize I was not the poet from that day. Pei You resented me, blamed me, and despised me. He said his wife should not be like me, possessing nothing but a beautiful face, yet devoid of any substance within. Whenever we were intimate, he would whisper sneers about my lack of dignity and grace, mocking my seductive demeanor as only being useful in bed. I grew terrified. So, returning to the day of the poetry gathering, that day, I stopped my older sister, who was about to write the poem for me, her voice trembling. "Thank you, sister, but there is no need." My sister frowned slightly and countered,
"But everyone else is writing. If you do not, you will surely be ridiculed by others."
But she did not understand the mockery of outsiders, compared to 10 years of torment in the Marquis's inner chambers, was not worth mentioning at all. Keeping my head down, I whispered softly, "Even if you help me this time, you cannot help me the next. My stupidity and ignorance are plain to see. How can I hide it in front of others?" My eldest sister froze instantly. After a long silence, she pulled me into her arms and said,
"Nonsense. My Sui is by no means dull."
I was 6 years old when our mother passed away, and my eldest sister was 8. When I was 7, a severe fever affected my brain, leaving me slow and dull. I couldn't understand books, and even the Chinese characters my sister taught me thousands of times were often forgotten. Within a few years, I became known far and wide in the capital as the dull-witted young lady. My sister was consumed with guilt. She blamed my condition on her failure to notice my fever in the middle of the night, believing she had called the doctor too late. My sister protected me and doted on me. Whatever excellent things came her way, she would always try to give them to me. Those painful memories of the past followed me like a shadow. In countless nights, they tortured my heart and filled me with dread. The breeze blew through the pavilion, and the shadows of the trees swayed. My sister looked at the noble young ladies reciting poetry before the water pavilion and gently stroked my long hair with heartache.
"The purpose of the Marquis's poetry gathering today is to choose a wife for the second young master of the manor. You and second young master Pei have been pen pals for years. Although he hasn't inherited the title, he is handsome and highly accomplished. Our Sui is so sweet. Only a man like him is a worthy match. He knows your situation. After meeting you by chance once, he fell in love with you. Before coming to the gathering, he mentioned to me that you only need to present a poem with your name at the gathering to satisfy his elders, and he will choose you as his wife. He will cherish you like a treasure in the future. Be good, Sui. Just let me do this for you one more time. Once you marry into Yangning Marquis Manor, our Sui will have a peaceful life."
My sister spoke in a warm and gentle voice, coaxing me to keep it, just as she did every time she found a rare treasure for me. Every word was for my sake, yet every word buried my chance at love, bringing me to the verge of tears. But eldest sister, Pei You is not a good man. After we married, he detested me in every possible way and constantly threw in my face that if I hadn't cheated at the poetry gathering, he would never have married me. In that lifetime, I did not find the lifelong peace you envisioned for me. In my past life, I used my sister's arrangement to marry into the Marquis's household. This marriage made everyone green with envy. Those who knew the truth about me all said that Pei You was young and impetuous, blinded by my beauty, and that was why he didn't mind my simple-mindedness and married me. I believed so too, until at a family banquet, I failed to understand a reference to an ancient text mentioned by the Marquis's cousin. She covered her mouth and smiled mockingly.
"I thought a man as clever as my cousin would favor highly talented ladies. I never expected him to prefer someone so simple and innocent."
Failing to catch her malice, I thought she was praising me, so I bit my lip and gave a shy smile. "You flatter me, cousin." The moment those words left my mouth, the entire room fell dead silent. Sensing I had said something wrong, I turned to Pei You in a panic. His face was completely grim. Sitting beside me, he gripped his white jade chopsticks tightly, having absolutely no intention of helping me out. Tears welled up in my eyes. Just as I was about to cry from panic, a light chuckle came from the center of the room.
"My sister, in-law's understanding of this ancient text is indeed unique. I believe I have seen a similar interpretation in a rare manuscript by a great master.
I looked up and saw that the person helping me out was Pei Yu's most hated elder brother, the heir of the Marquis, Pei Ying. After returning to our room, I threw myself into Pei Yu's arms, complaining in distress, "Husband, why didn't you help me out of that situation? If it hadn't been for your eldest brother, I'm afraid I would have made a complete fool of myself tonight." Pei Yu's face darkened instantly.
In this entire household, the one I loathe the most is Pei Ying. You completely humiliated me in front of him tonight, and yet you have the nerve to bring him up to me. And you, who wrote that poem at the poetry gathering, why do you not even understand such a simple ancient text?
He grabbed my wrist and raised his voice.
Or rather, that poem from that day wasn't written by you at all.
Only then did I realize he had married me because of that poem. I froze instantly and asked foolishly, "If I weren't the one who wrote that poem, would you no longer love me?" "Pei," you replied forcefully.
Right.
My heart turned ice cold, holding back my tears. I spoke in anger. "That poem, my eldest sister wrote it for me because she was afraid I would embarrass myself. If you don't love me, we might as well separate." That day, Pei, you stayed in the study. I clutched my quilt and cried until my eyes were red. Afterward, Pei You treated me like heir, but I too had been raised and pampered like a precious treasure by my eldest sister, so I also put on a cold face, treating him as if he were nothing. Our mutual coldness was noticed by the Grand Dowager, and Pei Yu was summoned to the main hall and given a harsh scolding. That evening, he, who had been staying in the study, returned to my room. Ignoring my struggles, he tore open his sash and bloodshot eyes.
If you hadn't faked it at the poetry gathering, how could I have possibly married you? Pei Ying will surely marry a talented woman. I was already inferior to him in every way. Once his wife enters the household, you will surely be trampled into the dirt by her and humiliate me. I regret marrying you so much. My wife should not be a girl who is empty of substance but for her stunning looks, and who possesses not a single drop of ink in her mind. Ming Sui, you were the one who insisted on marrying me. No matter how I treat you in the future, you had better endure it.
From then on, Pei You stayed in my room every single night, entangling himself with me as if he never felt weariness. When I resisted, he would pinch my chin and force his lips upon mine, his tone full of contempt.
You lack the dignified air of a proper wife. Yet, you are full of seductive wiles. You are only of some use in bed. Why put on such a hypocritical act of a virtuous woman?
Every single word pierced my heart like a dagger. Tears fell in heavy drops. Yet Pei You turned a deaf ear to it, tightening his grip even further. I was terrified, but every time I tried to flee regardless of the consequences, Pei You, who served as an official in the Ministry of Personnel, would always threaten me with the official career of my eldest sister's husband.
If you ever dare, without my permission, to take a single step out of the Marquis's estate, your eldest sister and her husband will starve to death in Lingnan.
Therefore, when I accidentally drowned, sinking into the deep green waters of the pond, I thought in my dazed state, if I could live my life over again, I would absolutely never marry him. Fortunately, I was able to live again. I bit my lip and shook my head anyway. "I do not wish to steal your literary talents anymore, eldest sister." Eldest sister burst into laughter and poked my head lightly.
How is this stealing? As long as my Sui likes it, be it the clouds in the sky or the water on the earth, I will rack my brains to secure it for you.
I bit my lower lip hard and added, "But what if? What if I do not wish to marry the second young master of the Yongning Marquis's estate? Ever since father remarried, we sisters have been marginalized in this household, with no elders to care for us in our daily lives. There was no one to help plan our marriages either. In my past life, being able to marry Pei You as I wished must have cost my eldest sister a great deal of effort. I did not want to let my sister's hard work go to waste, but life in the Marquis's household was too difficult. I am not willing to endure it again in this life." I lowered my head, not daring to meet my sister's disappointed eyes, but she simply said,
"So it turns out Sui has no feelings for him. Very well, then sister won't make a match for you this time."
I snapped my head up and met her smiling eyes. I couldn't hold it in and retched and buried myself in her embrace, weeping, but this had cost her so much effort. She smiled and held me tightly.
"It is all right. I still have several pen pals who are the same age as you. We can take our time choosing."
She gently wiped away my tears and said solemnly,
Sui, you are the most precious treasure mother left to me in this world. No matter what you have done, you never need to feel sorry to me. If you don't want to marry Pei You, then don't. Why shed tears and make me feel bad? Come on, stop crying. I will take you home now.
After bid farewell to the noble ladies of the Marquis's residence, I followed behind my sister, accompanying her as we strolled through the deep green corridors. The corridors of this estate, I had walked upon them for 10 years, yet my heart had never felt as light and free as it did now. A gentle breeze brushed against my face, the sky was bright and clear, and the steps were adorned with the full beauty of spring. Pei You appeared from around the corner. He wore a long robe with wide sleeves, his dark hair bound by a jade hairpin. His face was handsome and clean-cut, exuding an air of elegant refinement. Anyone who saw him would praise him as a truly handsome young gentleman. My sister stepped slightly to the side to shield me behind her, and led me to bow to him.
Good day, second young master Pei. Thank you for your family's warm hospitality, but I suddenly feel unwell, and it is not suitable for me to stay any longer. I will take my sister and return home first.
Pei You furrowed his sharp brows. His gaze shifted slightly before lazily coming to rest on me.
Your sister.
My elder sister did not change her expression as she took over the conversation.
Some time ago, blame it on my drinking too much. I wrote down some sheer nonsense on paper, which only served to make you laugh, second young master.
Pei You's gaze did not waver. He asked with a faint smile.
Sheer nonsense.
My sister let out a soft laugh.
Right, please do not believe any of it, second young master.
But Pei You said without the slightest hesitation.
But I believed every single word.
He knit his brows, his tone a mixture of anger and confusion.
Ming Sui, aside from me, who else can you entrust your simple-minded sister to?
His absolute certainty instantly angered my sister, who cherished me like a treasure. Her face darkened immediately.
Mind your words, second young master. My Sui Sui is innocent and delightful. It has always been her place to pick and choose others. Someone like you, second young master, would never catch her eye.
Suppressing the fear of Pei You from my past life, I poked my head out from behind my sister and immediately chimed in. In this lifetime, I, Ming Sui, would rather spend my days by a lonely lantern in an ancient temple than ever involve myself with you in the slightest, second young master. As for my marriage, I will not trouble second young master Pa to worry about it. Leaving behind a dark-faced Pei You, my sister took my hand and walked away with large strides. Once we returned to our room, my sister's anger had still not subsided.
To think I have been pen pals with him for several years, yet I never realized he was such an arrogant and conceited man.
With that said, she gently patted her chest. She looked completely relieved.
Thank goodness you don't love him. Otherwise, if you married into that house, I fear you would have suffered under his thumb your whole life.
A pang of sadness hit me, and tears almost fell from my eyes. If my elder sister knew that I had been tormented by Pei You for 10 years in my past life, I could not imagine how guilt-ridden she would be. When the news of my death by drowning reached his ears, I wondered just how grieved he would have been. Refusing to dwell on those memories any longer, I resolved never to marry Pei You. That way, my sister would surely never have to suffer such grief. My sister did not notice my distraction. She continued talking to herself.
Sui Sui, tomorrow I will take you out to meet another pen pal of mine. He is 1,000 times better than Pei You. His name is Pei Ying, Pei Yu's elder brother, and the heir of the Marquis of Yongning. Exceptionally intelligent since childhood, his reputation echoes throughout the capital. People often say his future official career will be smooth sailing, even though he is somewhat aloof by nature and detests foolish people the most. I originally thought the two of you wouldn't suit each other, but considering our Sui Sui is so delightful, matching with him is still more than a perfect fit.
I was instantly stunned. Pei Ying, the man who had helped me out of a difficult situation at the banquet. In my past life, he indeed held high office and great power, but just as my sister said, he detested foolish people the most. The old matriarch of the Marquis's household often urged him to meet young ladies, but he would always reply coldly,
I do not care for ladies who lack quick wits.
This would anger the old matriarch so much that she would slam the table.
What do you mean lack quick wits? Do you think daughters of other families are all like your brother's wife?
Realizing I was present, the old matriarch swallowed the rest of her words back down, probably used to being ridiculed. I had simply lowered my head in silence, without a single ripple of emotion in my heart. But Pei Ying replied,
Other families' daughters indeed cannot compare to my sister-in-law in terms of inner grace.
I looked up abruptly and saw Pei Ying smiling right at me. So no matter how proud and aloof he seemed to others, he had always been humble and polite in my eyes. Judging by character, he was indeed, as my elder sister had said, 1,000 times better than Pei You. Unfortunately, Pei Ying had no desire to marry. In my past life, up until the moment I drowned, he had remained unmarried. Therefore, my sister's plan to betroth me to him was likely going to fail.
Sui, what do you think of him? Would you like to meet him?
Looking at my sister, who was asking so excitedly, I didn't want to spoil her spirits. I leaned affectionately against her shoulder and smiled happily. I will leave it all up to you, sister. It was late spring, and the grass was lush and green. In my past life, no matter how much the matriarch of the Marquis's household urged him, Pei Ying had never once agreed to a blind date. Who would have thought my sister could actually persuade him to attend today? It was truly a wonder. I furrowed my brow, thinking slowly as I walked. I was so slow that I stepped into a small pothole, falling straight into Pei Ying's arms. I could only stare at him blankly. Pei Ying held me firmly, helping me steady myself. His voice was clear and melodious, like the clinking of fine jade. He asked with concern,
Second Miss Ming, are you hurt from the fall?
Belatedly realizing what had happened, a blush crept up my cheeks. I quickly thanked him. No, I'm not hurt. Thank you, Heir Pei. He gave a soft chuckle. Back then, I had absolutely no idea. Such a thing as fate is indeed that wondrous. It fills one's heart with joy and makes it skip a beat.
No need for thanks. It is also thanks to your tumble that we now have a bit of a matchmaking atmosphere.
I suddenly looked up, meeting Pei Ying's gaze, which held a hidden smile. He made no effort to hide the joy that was about to overflow from him, nor did he avoid my gaze, allowing me to study him, as he also studied me at his leisure. His directness caused the blush that had just faded from my face to gradually resurface. In a panic, I looked ahead at my eldest sister, who was strolling hand in hand with her future husband, trying to seek her help on how to deal with the situation before me. But my sister's figure was blocked by an annoying large hand. Pei Ying's slender, well-defined hand waved in front of me. He said with a smile,
I am the gentleman on this blind date with you. Don't keep staring at your eldest sister.
But in his past life, he had no desire to marry, unable to hide my thoughts, and unable to seek help from my sister. I hesitated for a long while. Biting my lip, I asked, Do you truly have the heart to marry? As soon as the words left my mouth, I realized how incredibly abrupt they sounded. Thinking of this, I explained with a completely serious face. Actually, I know how to read fortunes. I saw that in your past life you did not want to take a wife and lived a carefree, leisurely life. That is why I asked. Pei Ying was suddenly taken aback, and the slight curve of his lips instantly vanished. In a fleeting moment that no one noticed, grief flickered across his face, along with heartache and the joy of reclaiming what was lost. An instant later, he slowly smiled again.
Whether in my past life or this life, if I did not want to take a wife, there could only be one reason, and that is, I failed to marry the girl I love. Suiza, I fell in love with you at first sight, and I want to spend my life marrying you as my wife and keeping you safe and well every year. You be willing to marry me?
In our past life, even when Pei Ying and Pei Yu were at daggers drawn, he was still willing to help me, his sister-in-law, out of a difficult situation. If I become his wife in this life, it feels like it would be wonderful too. At the very least, he wouldn't just stand by and watch when others mocked me. Then, recalling how my eldest sister and future brother-in-law's wedding date kept being delayed time and again, I was taken aback and immediately took up my brush to write back to Pei Ying. I am happy to marry you. If possible, please come to my home to present the betrothal gifts in 3 days. Without any winding, sweet words, I directly informed Pei Ying of my willingness to marry him. My eldest sister stood beside me, looking at the awkward, round characters I wrote, and said through gritted teeth,
This Pei Ying guy, we've only met him once, yet he has already won our Sui's favor. He is truly incredibly lucky.
Looking at my eldest sister's beautiful and lively face, I bit my lip and smiled. This way, my sister can finally put her mind at ease. She certainly won't slip into my room in the middle of the night anymore, leaning by my bed and weeping in secret. Whether in our past life or this life, she was always worried that after she married, I would be bullied in the Ming household. Ming Sui's letter was delivered to the Yongning Marquis mansion. Pei Ying's servant tucked the letter into his robes and ran hurriedly toward his master's courtyard. These past few days, Pei Ying had constantly been asking if there was any letter from Lady Ming. After waiting and waiting, it had finally arrived today. The servant hurried through the courtyard, thinking to himself. To my surprise, a wild gust of wind blew across the path. The thin letter was swept away by the wind, spinning several times in midair before falling to the ground. The servant rushed to pick it up, but unexpectedly, he was a step too late. Pei Yu, who was also at home, picked it up first. Ignoring the servant's protests, he tore the letter open. The letter had only 2 lines, extremely short, but the information revealed in it made him ecstatic, his face instantly filling with a triumphant look that he couldn't hide at all. Pei Yu smirked as he read it and muttered to himself,
Now she is willing to marry me. Well, I don't want to marry her anymore, and she wants me to bring the betrothal gifts in 3 days. Ming Sui. 3 days later. Even if you wait until dark, I won't show up. I'd like to see who else besides me would be willing to marry you.
After saying this, he tossed the letter aside and walked away gleefully, shaking his paper fan. He left so quickly and abruptly, so he didn't hear what the servant said next.
Second young master, you've got it wrong. That letter is for our heir.
Red leaves drift by the southern apricots, while banana trees sigh under the midnight rain. Pei Ying had been anxious and uneasy these past few days. He feared that Ming Sui's letter would never come, and feared even more that it would be a letter of rejection, worrying that he might miss his chance with her. Suddenly, the servant's shout echoed in the courtyard.
My master, there is a letter from second Miss Ming today. Her letter has finally arrived.
Unable to wait any longer, Pei Ying leaped straight out of the window. He quickly strode up to the servant, snatched the letter from his hand. Next, with trembling hands, he opened the letter. I am happy to marry you. If possible, please come to my home in 3 days with the betrothal gifts. Just 2 lines of text, yet Pei Ying read them silently in his heart over and over again. Finally, he pointed at the letter and verified with his servant as if unable to believe it.
She is willing to marry me, right?
My eyes aren't playing tricks on me. With the letter thrust right in front of his face, the servant saw 2 rows of round, clumsy Chinese characters. He couldn't help but read them aloud.
I am happy to marry you. If possible, please come to my home in 3 days with the betrothal gifts.
Looking up quickly, he met his master's eager gaze. The servant nodded vigorously.
Yes, the second Miss Ming is happy to marry you. Your eyes are not playing tricks on you.
As soon as he finished speaking, the servant saw his usually aloof and composed master let out a dazed, ecstatic laugh.
Ha ha ha. Wonderful. Sui is willing to marry me.
The servant knew that Pei Ying had long been deeply in love with the second Miss Ming, so he also grinned broadly.
Right, our estate is finally going to have a consort.
With that said, he suddenly remembered the mishap while retrieving the letter. Frowning, the servant recounted exactly how he had run into Pei You. Upon hearing the servant vividly mimic Pei Yu's words,
I'd like to see who else would marry you besides me.
Pei Ying sneered. In his previous life, when searching for a home for Sui, how did an idiot like Pei Yu manage to marry her? And yet, after marrying her, he did not cherish her, torturing her for years for no reason, and ultimately costing her life. At this thought, Pei Ying wished he could tear his flesh apart and drink his blood. He exuded a terrifying chill, causing the servant beside him to hold his breath in fear. After a long pause, the servant hesitated for a moment and asked with a trembling voice,
Should we still clarify things with the second young master? Wasn't that book meant for him? From what I saw, it seems the young master misunderstood.
My master had always been on bad terms with the second young master. The second young master envied my master's superior talent and that he was born earlier, taking the title of heir apparent from him. Yet, they were biological brothers after all. If the second young master only understood about the book later on and realized the book was not given to him, he would likely bring trouble to my master, making their brotherly relationship even more strained. Despite thinking this in his heart, Pei Ying replied in a cold tone.
Didn't you say it yourself? He didn't hear it himself. Who else can he blame?
Before he could successfully marry Sui as he wished, it would be best if Pei Yu remained completely in the dark. Pei Ying stopped beside the honest servant and thought expressionlessly. 3 days later, Pei Ying came to visit as scheduled, bringing formal betrothal gifts, asking for her birth chart matching their Chinese zodiac signs, calculating an auspicious wedding date, and presenting the betrothal list. In just 4 days, my marriage to Pei Ying was officially set in stone. Inside the main hall, father smiled subserviently to Pei Ying.
My young daughter has a slow and foolish temperament. Even being your concubine would be an overreach and a blessing of your affection. Yet you are actually marrying her with the rights of a primary wife. I only pray she will be gentle and virtuous after marriage, managing the household well, so as not to fail your deep affection, my lord.
Father had always loved doing embarrassing things. My elder sister and I lowered our heads for fear of showing a hint of unfilial laughter in front of others. He slammed his teacup down on the table. With a sharp clack, he cut off my father's mocking words. Pei Ying looked at him with cold eyes, his voice flat and distant.
The betrothal gifts have been delivered, and the wedding date has been set. She is my betrothed wife, a future noble lady of the imperial court. Such mocking words. I hope my father-in-law will refrain from speaking them.
Looking at my father's face, which which had turned ashen. Filled with anger, he dared not voice, and uttered no word. Unable to stop my lips from curving upward. Suddenly, looking up, I saw Pei Ying gazing at me with deep affection. The moment our eyes met, my heart gave a violent shudder, and my mind suddenly went blank. The feeling came so fast that I was flustered, and my face flushed red. Not far away, Pei Ying was smiling, and my eldest sister was smiling too. Therefore, with a blushing face, I smiled as well. The pair of wild geese Pei Ying sent as betrothal gifts was very noisy, making me feel restless. That night, I tossed and turned. The moonlight covered the floor like snow, and the room felt lonely and cold until a sound came from the door. With a soft creak, the door opened and then closed again. My eldest sister walked gently to the bedside. I closed my eyes, pretending to be fast asleep. She bent down to tuck me in, afraid that I might catch a cold. My eldest sister was crying again, her tears held back, her voice hoarse.
When mother was alive, she always told me that father was heartless and faithless, unfit to be a father, unfit to be a husband, and unfit to be a son. She said he had truly failed us sisters for saddling us with such a biological father. So before she passed away, she used every ounce of her remaining strength to choose a good husband for me. But when it came to Sui, she couldn't even lift her wrist anymore. When she passed, her eyes were still open. It was I who reached out to close them for her. I understood mother's worries. She knew that after she was gone, and once Sui came of age, father would surely use Sui's marriage to trade for the power and influence he desired. I was terrified as well. So for the past few months, I couldn't rest day or night, dreading that after I married, I still wouldn't have found a safe harbor for Sui. Fortunately, it has all turned out well. Sui is going to marry into the Yongning Marquis household. Your older sister is truly so happy today.
I turned my body over, facing away from my sister, terrified she would notice my falling tears. In my past life, on the night Pei You proposed, my sister had said the exact same things. Ever since mother passed away, my sister had treated me exceptionally well. She worried I wouldn't eat enough, worried I wouldn't grow fast enough, and worried I would be bullied by others. I always knew I was a burden to her. Her wedding with her betrothed was delayed time and again, all because of me. A few months ago, my sister's future mother-in-law had smiled and said to me with hidden meaning,
"If you do not find a good match, I fear Ming Hui will never enter our family's door. Second young lady Ming, you truly are fortunate to have an older sister who plans for you in every way."
My sister worried, and I worried too. So even though I disliked Pei Yu, I still married him. I never expected that I would ultimately meet such a tragic death. In this second life, I avoided Pei Yu and chose Pei Ying, who possesses excellent character, and remain united with him in heart. I believe I won't suffer such torment again, or end up drowning to death. That way, my elder sister won't have to grieve. I closed my eyes and, amidst my sister's bittersweet murmuring, drifted off to sleep. In my dream, my mother smiled and said to me,
Sui, this is an excellent marriage. You can marry him without any worries.
Red silk carpeted the long street, and firecrackers resounded in unison. My sister smiled beside me and said,
Only Pei Ying's good looks are barely worthy of our Sui.
My sister's high praise suddenly made me a bit curious. I carefully lifted a corner of my bridal veil and saw Pei Ying standing as straight as a tree. His usually cold and detached face was softened by the crimson wedding robe, adding a touch of warmth to this grand occasion. His gaze caught me stealing a glance, and he slowly approached me, opening his palm. He smiled gently and said,
My lady, I have come to take you home.
A gentle breeze rippled the green pond in the courtyard, stirring my heart and sealing a perfect match. I placed my hand in Pei Ying's palm and bit my lip shyly, saying, Very well. Amidst the festive music, I stepped into the bridal sedan. We paid respects to heaven and earth, entered the bridal chamber, and the red veil was lifted. On the festive bed, I accepted the nuptial wine offered by Pei Ying. At first, I took small sips on my own. Next, Pei Ying fed me wine mouth to mouth. Trembling, I leaned against his chest. As our breaths tangled, the wine became secondary. Next, Pei Ying fed me wine mouth to mouth. Trembling, I leaned against his chest. As our breaths tangled, the morning sun rises, lighting up the window. Birds perch on the branches, announcing a clear day. He firmly dismissed the maid who wanted to help draw my eyebrows. Bending down, he picked up the brush. As he drew, he told me about the family situation.
Our family has very few members. Aside from the matriarch, my father, and my aunt, there is no one else. The concubines and maids common in other households are strictly forbidden in ours. So, you only need to pay your respects to the matriarch. My father and my aunt, these 3 relatives. You don't need to pay attention to any other outsiders.
I knew all of this from my past life, but, biting my lip, I still asked anyway. I heard there is a cousin staying with us. What gift should I prepare for her? And there was also his brother. Since we parted at the poetry gathering, I hadn't crossed paths with him again, even during yesterday's grand wedding. While I was happy to have married Pei Ying as I wished, I also felt an underlying anxiety, like a sword hanging over my head. At the banquet back then, I had gone back on my vow to marry him through poetry with my elder sister, and even had a verbal dispute with him. Now, I had married his elder brother of the same mother, perhaps because I fell in love with Pei Ying, and now that I had married his elder brother of the same mother, I was terrified he would embarrass me in front of the elders. Pei Ying let out a cold laugh, filled with absolute disdain.
Since she is just a temporarily residing cousin, why bother being polite to her? Just pick a copy of the Analects for her, so she can learn a bit more about benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and trust, and cause less trouble, and going to do stupid things.
After saying this, Pei Ying conjured up a kingfisher feather gold hairpin from somewhere, and gently slid it into my hair.
Oh, that is right. I also have a younger brother from the same mother, named Pei You.
He bent down to study the hairpin's position for a long moment, then scoffed with a grin.
Though we share the same mother, he is foolish to the extreme. He and I have never gotten along, so you don't need to pay him any mind either. After today, you don't have to pay respects to the dowager lady and my mother every single day. Visiting them during festivals and holidays is enough. If you go too often, they will find it annoying.
I froze instantly. Was that really all right? In my past life, Pei, you had always kept me under strict discipline. He said that even though the Marquis's household was small, propriety must never be neglected. So, even though the dowager lady and my mother-in-law both said that paying respects on holidays was enough, I didn't dare to act carelessly and would often go to their rooms to greet them. Even though the cousin residing with us disliked me, I still treated her with a smiling face, bringing her gifts during every festival. And now, Pei Ying was telling me there was no need.
Of course.
Looking down with a smile, he leaned in and kissed my lips.
Since you are my wife, there is absolutely no reason for you to suffer mistreatment from anyone.
My heart suddenly swelled with warmth, and my nose tingled slightly. I reached out and wrapped my arms around Pei Ying's waist, pressing my body close against his. In all sincerity, I whispered, Pei Ying, being with you is a blessing. Ever since storming off after his falling out with Ming Sui at the poetry gathering, Pei, you had been utterly vexed. In his past life, he had never had a single disagreement with Ming Sui before marriage. He had held back his temper and dragged things out until after they were wed. But once reborn, and still not used to it, he had already angered Ming Sui and Ming Hui. Ming Sui was simple-minded and could barely be managed, but Ming Hui was a different story. Her younger sister was her Achilles heel, and she hated it most when outsiders mocked Ming Sui. Yet back then, on the veranda, the words he spoke had been incredibly hurtful. Pei You was extremely agitated. He pondered for days, but could not think of a single way to appease Ming Hui's resentment. The late spring breeze was gentle, and flowers bloomed and fell. Pei Yu fanned himself with a paper fan to ease the frustration in his heart. Suddenly, as a gentle breeze swept by, a letter drifted slowly down to his feet. He had excellent eyesight, and immediately saw, on the envelope, those characters both familiar and distant, to be opened personally by young Master Pei. This was sent to him by Ming Sui. She must have regretted the things she said to him at the poetry gathering. Without hesitation, Pei Yu tore open the envelope. There were only 2 short sentences inside, yet they made Pei Yu ecstatic. I am happy to marry you. If possible, please come to present the betrothal gifts in 3 days. Pei Yu smiled, but then he remembered Ming Sui saying that day she wouldn't marry him, and he grew angry again.
Now you say you're willing to marry me. Well, I don't want to marry you anymore, and present gifts in 3 days. Ming Sui, even if you wait until dark 3 days from now, I won't go. I'd like to see, aside from myself, would be willing to marry you.
Ming Sui was not present, so of course these words were not meant for her ears. He was merely saying them to himself. He fancied Ming Sui, even though he often mocked her for being simple-minded. But love is love. Even in another life, he would still choose her. So, having had his say, he tossed the letter aside, fluttered his paper fan, and left in high spirits. He departed in a great rush, hurrying to ask his mother to present the betrothal gifts to Ming Sui on his behalf. The banquet was meant for choosing a wife. Mother is still angry, so I must first go to the market and buy her favorite sweet-scented osmanthus cake, and then coax her. The more Pei I thought about it, the happier he became. But by the time he brought back the osmanthus cake, he didn't even have the chance to see his mother. His superior had sent someone to his house, as there was an urgent disaster outside the city, and he was ordered to leave the city to handle it. He looked hesitantly at the sweet-scented osmanthus cake in his hand. After a long time, time. He handed it over to a servant, mounted his horse, and galloped away. It would only take a few days to leave the capital. It won't be too late to propose to Ming Sui when I return. In any case, he would cherish Ming Sui dearly in this lifetime, never wanting her to be bullied by outsiders, much less making things difficult for her at every turn. He would absolutely never fight with her again, causing her to drown to death, and for the rest of your life. They still have a long life ahead of them. Walking past the lush green corridor, the main hall was just a short turn away as the bright sun streamed in, revealing 4 or 5 figures in the main hall. From afar, a familiar voice could be heard.
Incredible. The master of our Marquis household, who has always kept his distance from women, actually got married. The wedding was arranged in such a rush, happening right when I was sent out of the capital on official business. Even though I am his biological brother, I didn't even get to drink a single cup of wedding wine.
To share in his good fortune, Pei Ying held my hand, slowly guiding me forward at my own pace. As we reached the doorway, he replied in a loud voice,
This is indeed my fault as your elder brother. Once your sister-in-law has paid her respects to our elders, I will surely send someone to your quarters with a jar of newer Hong wine, so you won't miss out on the blessings of your elder brother and sister-in-law.
After saying this, Pei Ying softly told me to watch the threshold. Watch your step at the threshold. I nodded slightly, stepped over the threshold, and entered the main hall. With a sudden crash, the teacup on Pei Yu's table was knocked over. Under the shocked gazes of the elders, he abruptly stood up, staring intently at me standing beside Pei Ying. His hand, pressed hard against the table, turned pale with prominent veins. In utter disbelief, he asked,
May I ask what sister-in-law's name is, and from which noble family does she come?
Every single word sounded as if ravaged by a wild wind, dry and hoarse. After kowtowing and greeting each of the elders, I finally curtsied to him from a distance. My family name is Ming, and my given name is Sui. I am the child of a minor official in the capital. Second young master probably does not know me. Suddenly, Pei You lost his mind. He kicked over the tea table and rushed toward me in a frenzy.
This makes no sense. How could you be married to him? You were supposed to be married too.
In an instant, Pei Ying shielded me behind him, blocking the shattered pieces of the teacup and splinters, as well as the madly grimacing Pei Yu. He pressed his hand heavily onto Pei Yu's shoulder with a sudden burst of force, forcing him to fall to his knees on the floor. Pei Yu's words were cut short. Pei Ying looked down at him on the floor, his tone icy cold.
Pei Yu, shut up.
Then, with a calm demeanor, he led me to take our leave of the furious elders. He held me in his arms. He stepped back onto the corridor we had come from. We were very close to the main hall, so we could still hear the faint, blurry sounds from inside.
You beast, what on earth did you just say? To your eldest brother and sister-in-law. To hell with sister-in-law. She was clearly meant to be my wife. What nonsense are you talking? Guards, bring me the whip. I will surely beat this arrogant, insolent beast to death today.
Suddenly, Pei Ying covered my ears tightly with his hands. He stopped in his tracks, a trace of annoyance in his eyes.
Are you worried about him? Your ears are perked up like a rabbit is.
Me? I tilted my head in shock. Pei Ying bit his lip and nodded. I shook my head. Absolutely not. I just wanted to hear father-in-law give him a good thrashing. As soon as the words left my mouth, I realized I couldn't hide my absolute disgust for Pei Yu at all, so I explained further. I recently attended the poetry gathering hosted by your Marquis Heir. As we were leaving, my eldest sister and I happened to run into him. We got into a dispute over his words, and that is why
I'm gloating over him getting beaten.
Pei Ying chimed in, his expression instantly brightening from gloomy to cheerful. I nodded, repeatedly. Pei Ying smiled.
It is fine as long as you don't care about him. You are my wife, and you must only care about me.
Chatting along the way, we walked back to our room. Just as we entered, the door closed with a creak, and the light inside instantly dimmed. I stopped in front of the vanity, feeling puzzled. Why close the door? The maids haven't even helped me remove my makeup and change my clothes yet. A pair of arms wrapped around my slender waist from behind as he leaned down, showering me with gentle kisses from top to bottom. As our breaths mingled, Pei Ying's tone turned seductive.
For trifling matters like this, of course I will help you.
In an instant, the jade hairpin fell to the floor, and my long dress slipped off. That day, I never left the room. On the 3rd day after our wedding, Pei Ying went to find the butler to arrange the homecoming gifts. I stayed obediently in the room, waiting for him to handle everything before returning to my family home with him. Since my rebirth, this was the longest my elder sister and I had been apart. I missed her so very much, but when I remembered that in this lifetime, without Pei or schemes, my sister wouldn't have to follow her husband to Lingnan for his official post, I felt happy again. In this life, even if we sisters married separate families, we could still meet each other from time to time. As I thought about this, the corners of my mouth curled up involuntarily. Suddenly, A harsh male voice drifted down from above.
Does marrying him make you that happy?
Startled, I looked up as Pei Yu leaped down from the high wall, clutching my chest. I took several steps back. You, don't you dare do anything reckless. This is your elder brother's domain. Pei Yu gave a bitter smile.
Do you fear me that much?
I lowered my head, remaining silent out of sheer fear. Pei Yu spoke again.
Clearly, everything has not even begun yet. We still have hope to start over. Why did you marry yourself off to an outsider so hastily?
I backed away while biting my hand. I don't understand what you are talking about. It is still not too late for you to leave now. Otherwise, I will call for help. For every step I retreated. Pei Yu advanced a step. He smiled indifferently.
Go ahead and scream. I will have you.
Who in this world could possibly stop me? Catching sight of a figure appearing not far away, I suddenly smiled. Fortunately, it wasn't in vain. I went through all the trouble to send everyone in the household away, just to set up this time for us to be alone. I squeezed out some tears and cried out miserably. Grand Dowager, father-in-law, mother-in-law, please save me. Second brother. I don't know what kind of evil spell second brother is under, but he actually broke into my room and said a lot of nonsensical things to me. That day, mother-in-law's face was completely dark with rage. My husband thoughtfully pulled me into his embrace. He glanced at Pei Yu, who was slumped on the ground, beaten so badly by him that he couldn't even stand. With a grim face, he said to my father-in-law,
When my wife suffers, I suffer too. Pei Yu's behavior is utterly insolent, and his character is thoroughly deplorable. He is unfit for polite society. If left unchecked, he will surely bring ruin to the Marquis's household. With things as they are, do you elders still want to protect him? Since everyone is here today, let's make a decision. Do you keep him or keep me? If you keep him, from now on, the two of us will have nothing to do with this household. If you keep me, then once Sui and I return from our bridal visit, I don't want to run into him at home.
With that said, he pulled me along toward the carriage. He whispered in my ear,
Don't be afraid, Sui. By the time we return home,
this person will have disappeared. My eyes lit up, and I nodded firmly. Very well. Upon returning to the Ming Manor, my eldest sister's eyes welled with tears the moment she saw me. She held my hand, looking me over and over, fearful that I had suffered during these past 3 days at the Yongning Marquis Manor. Seeing absolutely nothing amiss, my sister finally asked,
Has he been good to you?
I lowered my head, smiling shyly, exceedingly so. My sister was stunned for a moment. Her expression was sentimental at first, but then turned to joy.
That is good to hear. I can rest easy from now on.
I smiled faintly. Suddenly, my sister spoke again.
In a month, he and I will be wed. From then on, we sisters will live in separate households.
For some reason, my sister suddenly felt a sense of dread.
Once we are no longer under the same roof, will our bond remain as close as it is now? Sui, will you suddenly grow tired of your sister? What if my husband and I are sent to serve in a very distant place? Will I stop receiving your letters?
In my past life, up until my death, I wrote to my sister every single month, but after I died, if no one sent news of my passing to Lingnan, and my sister never received another letter from me, would she have been just as terrified as she was now? The moment I thought of this scene, my tears could no longer be held back. I buried myself in my sister's embrace and made a vow to her. That is impossible. I will never suddenly grow tired of you, sister. Not in this lifetime. No matter the ends of the earth, my heart will always remember my sister. After returning home, my spirits remained low for a long while. Pei Ying held me and comforted me.
If you miss your eldest sister, we can go visit her anytime. Suiza, I will indulge you in everything you love to do.
I had fallen in love with Pei Ying. Under his soothing comfort, my spirits gradually improved. When I heard the news of Pei Yu being banished to Lingnan, that night, I actually ate half a bowl of rice more than usual. Under the cozy blanket, I leaned my head against Pei Ying's chest and asked, why was he suddenly demoted?
Someone is so arrogant and self-centered is bound to offend others sooner or later.
I gave a soft, leisurely murmur of agreement. This was absolutely perfect. At first, I had planned to secretly pass the evidence of Pei Yu's corruption from my past life to the court officials who held grudges against him. Right now, it saved me the trouble. I snuggled closer against Pei Ying's chest and smiled happily. Tonight was destined to be filled with sweet dreams. I closed my eyes, allowing sleepiness to wash over me. Beyond the wall, the bright moon hung high in the clear sky, with my beloved by my side.
This lifetime would be a blessed and happy one for Ming Sui. When our mother was alive, she always favored me. Back then, Sui would often pout unhappily, pursing her lips in grievance.
Mother, you must love Sui more.
Mother would smile and agree, and Sui believed her completely. Indeed, she had always been easily fooled, but Mother had lied to her. When Mother realized her time was running out, the first child she thought of was still me. Dragging her ailing body She secured a wonderful marriage for me first. Next, did she plan to look for a match for Sui Sui? But before she could start on any of it, she passed away. Before she passed away, Sui Sui wept by her side. Mother,
I will be obedient from now on. Please don't leave me and elder sister behind.
perhaps our mother felt too deep a sense of guilt toward her, for at the moment of her death, she could not close her eyes for the longest time. Leaning over the bedside, with tears streaming down my face, I gently closed our mother's eyes for her. From then on, she and I supported each other to get by in this house. Sui Sui was extremely well behaved. She listened to whatever I said. After the high fever damaged her brain, she became even more obedient. When she woke up, she stood on her tiptoes, embraced me as I wept in self-reproach, and, just like our mother used to do, gently stroked my head with her small hand.
Elder sister, don't cry. I'm all right.
But how could she possibly be all right? By nature, she was merely gullible. She was actually still a clever girl. Now, however, she could not remember anything. She struggled to learn anything at all, and she did not even know how to put on her own clothes. The physician said the high fever had caused cognitive impairment. There was absolutely no way to cure her. I won't listen to this, since she did not know how to dress herself. I taught her day after day. Since she could not remember things, I told her over and over again. Since she could not memorize books, I held her hand to trace the characters countless times, even though the whole capital rumored that Sui Sui was a little fool. But I understand. Our Sui Sui was not. Over the years, she learned to read books. She could recognize characters. She could dress herself on her own. She would even lose her temper with me. Sui Sui, she is clearly doing wonderful. Since Sui Sui is so wonderful, it is all the more reason for me to find a home for her. Over these past few years, I studied like crazy and unexpectedly earned a reputation as a talented lady. Heaven does not betray those who try hard. My talent won the approval of some influential people, and I was able to bring Sui Sui to higher class social gatherings. I also made many pen pals, some of whom were young masters from humble backgrounds, and others who were sons of high officials. I carefully filtered through them and selected 2 men who seemed like good matches for Sui Sui. As luck would have it, they were brothers from the same mother. The elder brother was set to inherit the title, revered as the heir. Though he was highly educated, he was cold and sharp-tongued, constantly calling others fools. The second brother was the family's second young master. He had no title, but he also didn't have to carry the burden of the family legacy. He was gentle and kind, handsome, and highly accomplished in literature. Hesitantly, I wrote letters to them, explaining Sui Sui's actual condition. When the elder brother received the letter, he completely ignored it, continuing to write to me only to discuss ancient texts. But when the second brother received his, he replied, "Your sister is so pure and endearing." My heart filled with joy, thinking that the second brother might be the right home for Sui Sui. Later, I took my sister to the outskirts of the city for a spring outing, and ran into them on the way. After we returned home, the second brother wrote to me again. "I do not need to inherit the title, and my parents have very low expectations for a daughter-in-law. If you trust my character, why not betroth your sister to me?" Just as I was rejoicing, I received a letter from the elder brother. "The people you are associating with have no good intentions toward the second Miss Ming. If you want what is best for her, stop bringing her to meet that crowd. If you and second Miss Ming encounter any trouble, I can save you." I didn't understand why they disliked Sui Sui so much, but I was running out of time. My wedding date with my fiancé had been pushed back again and again. Even if my future mother-in-law was extremely kind, she would inevitably harbor some resentment. My father went so far as to say,
If you keep stalling and refuse to marry, then I will call off this engagement for you and find you another family to marry into. When that time comes, regardless of his age or whether he is a widower, you will have no choice but to marry him.
"I really don't have any time left. My wedding is less than 3 months away." I couldn't think of any other way. So I wrote a letter to the second brother, Pei You, the second young master of the Marquis's manor, asking if he was willing to marry Sui Sui as his formal wife. He didn't have to love her, but he had to treat her kindly for the rest of her life. In the middle of the night, I read his reply by Sui Sui's bedside. He said he agreed. He wanted me to bring Sui Sui to the Marquis Manor's poetry gathering and have her write an outstanding poem during the banquet. His mother was fond of talented women. For the sake of the poem, she would surely agree to let him marry Sui Sui. He had agreed right then and there. I assumed he was captivated by Sui Sui's beauty. If I had more time, I would have looked for the absolute best husband for her, but he was the most suitable man I could find for Sui Sui at the moment. So, I wrote back, "Sure." Finally, Sui Sui did as I wished and married into the Marquis's manor. But, on the day she returned to visit her family, I realized I had entrusted her to the wrong man. Sui Sui. She didn't seem happy at all. I secretly asked Sui Sui, "Does he treat you terribly?" Sui Sui was quiet for a moment, shook her hand, and whispered, "There are so many helpless things in in this world. My poor foolish sister. In the end, she entrusted her life to the wrong man. I wished I could cut him into 1,000 pieces to appease the immense hatred in my heart.
No, he is very good to me.
And then, before I could look further into Sui Sui's situation, my husband became implicated in a major case and was banished to Lingnan. Before leaving the capital, I went to the Marquis's estate to find Sui Sui. If he ever treats you badly, you must write to let me know. I will return to the capital to take you away. Afterwards, separated by vast distances, Sui Sui always wrote in her letters that she was doing very well. 1 letter a month, never missing a single one. Until 1 month, I suddenly stopped receiving her letters. I waited for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, and finally received a letter from Pei Ying announcing her death. He said Sui Sui had drowned. I did not believe it. If something had truly happened to Sui Sui, why didn't Pei Yu send me the death announcement himself? Unless he had a guilty conscience. Clutching the letter and carrying a sharp blade, I rushed back to the capital. On the way, I thought, if Sui Sui is truly dead, then Pei Yu must die too. Husband and wife are one. As Sui Sui lives, so shall she die. When I arrived in the capital, it was late spring once more, with the sharp blade hidden in my clothes. I stepped into the estate of the Marquis of Yongning, where the white mourning silks had not yet